Despite the South's many pest destruction boards went out of existence today, leaving farmers unhappy about the replacement. We find out what's causing the closure of these well-known health food shops. And sample a little entertainment from the drawing rooms of the Edwardian period. Good evening. 32 pest destruction boards in the South were signed out of existence by the government today. They've been combined into 5 big boards, but in turn these might be swallowed up in local authority amalgamation. Farmers are confused and upset at the loss of local control. In the meantime, rabbits are breeding to unprecedented numbers. Michael Lynch reports.
It's a scene you'll see all over Central most days. Bikes are now a regular part of teenage entertainment in the country, and the shooting sport certainly isn't going away. The poison bait has been raining down for years, millions has been spent, but the rabbits are still running riot on the range.
Yesterday I went out and I got 9 and, just all adds up.
Without too much trouble?
Yeah.
You reckon they're increasing?
Yeah, well, every 21 days they pop out another 5 or so and, yeah, it's quite a few.
In the meantime, rabbit control's becoming even more of a heartache. 40 years of rabbit boards, some big, some small, entered today with amalgamation into 5 boards: Central, Waitaki, Southland, and 2 for coastal Otago. Many farmers weren't happy with this loss of local control. They're even less happy with the local government commission plan for them to be lumped into an Otago and a Southland committee and tied in with weed control.
But to have local men in the district know exactly what's happening, whereabouts it's happening, and be able to do something about it when it does happen. I think if you become too general, then it becomes too difficult.
The Agricultural Pest Destruction Council's trying to overturn the local government commission plan, but it doesn't hold much hope. And the rabbits gamble on. In home gardens, they're even now resorting to the gin trap.
It's just thousands of them, millions.
I think Maxo is apparently the only answer.
And as for myxomatosis, well, a government report confirmed again today that its introduction's been ruled out. Instead, Cabinet's being asked for an extra $5 million for rabbit control in the worst areas.
With still no sign of rain or government aid, farmers in North Otago are facing up to a bleak future. The government's currently assessing the extent of the drought, but so far there's no sign of the relief they so desperately want. Meanwhile, individual farmers are doing what they can to relieve the pressure on their drought-stricken farms.
The burnt-out farmland's testimony to the damage done by months without rain. But the dryness has crept up insidiously. Farmers point out the mess they're left in is just as bad as the aftermath of a flood, but because it happens slowly, it's hard to get government to act. Meantime, they're doing what they can, grazing the roadsides, sending out stock.
Well, my farm was running 2,000 stock units in July, and now I'm down to 600. I've sold ewes and lambs all counted, plus I've had a bit of good fortune with people down south offering me free grazing.
So what does that mean? Does that mean you can get them away for the season? Or
Yes, it means that I can retain my hoggets, my breeding stock for next year. And it's something that I'll be grateful for years to come. It's not only the financial help, it's the moral help, and it gives you a real good lift.
But for most other farmers, apart from a little free hay yesterday, there's been nothing.
Most of us will be below the minimum average wage. No one here will be living. We're all living below that.
And what do you see in the future?
Not very much, unless there's a change of attitude in the government. We were told by Mr. Douglas that our agriculture exports didn't matter, and neither did we. So we're probably on the scrap heap.
I'm pretty much in a cropping situation, and if this continues, I'll have virtually no income for the whole year. So how I survive, I've got no idea. In the past, there's been enough buffer with droughts. We've had enough to carry us on, but we're now living on the breadline and there's nothing else to do.
The high dollar and high interest has crippled us.
And high costs.
And nobody cares. Well, that's what we feel.
When I took over my farm 25 odd years ago, the first year my net income was 80% of my gross. Now it's not even 10.
Now, you see, we haven't recovered from the 85 drought, and then with the change of policy with the government, the economics, and now this other drought, we just can't survive. That's
Akatarami's had more than its share of droughts, hasn't it? Really?
Yes, it has in the last few years. I think farmers have learnt a lot from the last one. We're in the process of growing varieties of grasses such as fescues and prairie grasses and other lucernes, which would have made our chances of surviving drought much better, but we haven't had the time to get those sort of things in since the last drought.
The lucerne that's been planted shows up like a green jewel in the Hakataramia Valley. A conservation group's still working on these long-term solutions. But it's the economic situation farmers like Alec Newlands believe must be tackled.
Well, I feel as though the burden has got to be lifted somehow off the farmers' shoulders and placed on some of our moneylenders' shoulders, because the situation has got out of control, and the problems has got to be faced up by some of these bankers and financial people.
What do you want them to do?
Well, I'd like to see our debt parked, especially the Royal Bank debt parked for 2 years, so it gives us a chance to recoup and come again.
Some breathing space from debt would give farmers hope for the future. Without it, apart from growing veggies, there's little farmers like Alec Newlands can do. Even if it rains, there are many who will be forced off the land.
Kathy Graham with that report. More and more natural foods are finding their way into shopping baskets as the health food business booms in New Zealand. Whole grains, cereals and dried fruits are being produced in bulk to meet the increased demand. But despite this, New Zealand's original health food producer is closing its chain of shops right throughout the country. Here's George Burke.
The closing of the sanitarium shops in Dunedin next week sees the end of an era. Even I can remember back to when I used to call them sanatorium. But the manufacturers are quick to point out that the products will still be on the market. The company's been going for 90 years and has a turnover of more than $70 million. It was started by Seventh-day Adventists in Australia and spread to New Zealand soon after. It's still run by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which advocates a vegetarian way of life. But their beliefs may have contributed to the demise of the 19 shops throughout the country, which represent 10% of income.
We, being a church organisation, and Saturday being our day of worship, puts us out of Friday night, Saturday training. So that is one of the reasons.
Sanitarium also says their costs are high, and of course supermarkets are now in the health food business. The company has factories in Auckland, Palmerston North and Christchurch, and John Burt says it's probably better economically to invest in plant and bring out more lines. For instance, the company's just commissioned a $2.5 million soya milk plant in Australia. But after more than 20 years in George Street, the North End shop will be missed by many shoppers, a feeling that'll be reciprocated.
You get to know the customers as they come in, and you see them growing up, and it becomes part of the family. Yes, we will.
There's no doubt one-stop shopping at supermarkets appeals to most people, and these outlets are geared up for the health-conscious too. But sanitarium products won't disappear. In fact, there may be more of them on supermarket shelves after a while. And the range of health foods is expanding all the time too. Things like dried beans, dried peas, curry powders, mixed spices, all sorts of powders and beans, and even biscuits. Hard biscuits.
George Burke getting his teeth into that story, no wonder he's lost weight. And the closure of Dunedin's 2 shops and 1 in Invercargill has meant 3 redundancies. Now a look at today's rather mixed bag of 3 o'clock temperatures. Showers at Half Moon Bay at 3 o'clock, 10 degrees. Invercargill rain and 11. Gore partly cloudy, 15. Balclutha cloudy and 15. Dunedin the high of 17, sharing that with Oamaru where it was cloudy and 17. Kura fine and 14. Ranfurly cloudy and 10. Queenstown the low today of 8 degrees with rain. Also raining in Wanaka and 9. Alexandra partly cloudy and the high 2 of 17. And Taana rain and 10. And for tomorrow, Dunedin 16 and Invercargill 14 degrees. Up to 8,000 people will have to suffer without electricity for 15 minutes this Sunday, while Electricorp connects its lines to the Clyde Dam. For a quarter of an hour, there will be no power supplied to parts of the Central Otago region. Another cut is planned for Labour weekend. Unfortunately for sports fans, Sunday's cut coincides with the start of the Rugby League World Cup final at 4 o'clock. In case you hadn't heard, it's National Music Week, and the Otago Early Settlers Museum has the ideal exhibition for lovers of antique musical instruments. As Marion Hazen discovered, there are even instruments for people who can't play a note.
Meet the clockwork polyphon, imported from Europe in the 1870s. In the Victorian and Edwardian eras, it was a drawing room status symbol. This little music box entertained customers in Benfield's bookshop in Great King Street. Let's hear a little bit of Edwardian rock and roll. The Edwardians took their music to the streets as well. Walk through the Octagon in those days and you might have heard a barrel organ. A more portable version is the Celestina, looking more like a cash register than a music box. Latest addition to the museum's collection is this English rosewood piano. Built in 1860, it still carries a pretty melody. However, not all of the museum's collection's in working order, but can still evoke memories of New Zealand's tuneful past.
Timeless music. We'll be back tomorrow. Good night.